Is the age of global free trade officially over? I mean, replaced by this ruthless new strategy where national security dictates what you can buy, what you can say, even where your next product comes from.
It certainly feels like a fundamental shift is underway, a really big one.
Yeah, we are seeing, well, it feels like a seismic shift in how the U.S. government views the world now.
Uh-huh, especially concerning major foreign adversaries. And, China is front and center in this.
For decades, the thinking was all about economic integration, right? Get everyone trading together.
Exactly. But our sources show this sudden, sharp focus now on sovereignty, on securing American data, protecting our borders from these really dangerous supply chains.
And the recent actions policymakers are taking, they really highlight how serious this new approach is.
Definitely. Look at the digital side.
Right. The House passed the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Controlled Applications Act. That's the TikTok bill, basically.
It demands TikTok sever ties with its Chinese parent ByteDance or, well, Face being kicked off U.S. app stores.
And at the same time, on the economic front, you've got new tariffs being rolled out.
And framed very explicitly, not as a typical trade issue, but as part of combating the fentanyl crisis.
So the geopolitical competition, it's heating up fast. Some sources we looked at are calling it a new Cold War.
A dangerous one, yeah.
Yeah.
And the response being pushed is this America First grand strategy.
Focused on containing who they see as the main threat, the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP.
Right.
So today we're going to dive into the sources that lay out the justification for these pretty aggressive interventionist policies.
And we'll explore those two primary drivers that seem interlinked. National security, think data, espionage, and influence, and this push towards economic nationalism focusing on accountability and, well, revenue, too.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how quickly that security lens has expanded? It's not just about missiles anymore. It's the apps on your phone.
Absolutely. So let's start there with the core national security argument for forcing divestiture, like with TikTok. It all hinges on foreign control. Our sources confirm TikTok is owned by ByteDance. That's a Chinese company. And it has documented links to the CCP.
And the legislation itself isn't super broad, is it?
No, that's critical. It's narrowly targeted. It focuses only on social media platforms controlled by 4 specific U.S. adversaries: China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea.
So the argument is this isn't anti-technology.
Exactly. It's anti-adversarial state control. That's the distinction they're making.
And the central fear there is that this control basically turns data collection into digital spying.
Pretty much, yeah. Digital espionage. What specifically are the sources saying the CCP could do with American user data?
That's the key question.
They warn that TikTok gathers and accesses, quote, troves of Americans' data. And we're not just talking about basic metadata here.
No. What else?
Well, one source points out the app could potentially collect info for future use in, say, large-scale facial recognition.
Wow.
Or to sharpen China's ability to exploit or influence Americans. And that could be anyone, a government employee or just an ordinary citizen using the app.
So the legal argument underpinning the bill is what exactly?
The consensus among its proponents is clear. The First Amendment doesn't give a foreign adversarial government the right to surveil Americans or systematically scoop up their personal data.
But it's not just about data theft, right? There's an influence angle, too.
Oh, absolutely. It's about potentially poisoning the information environment itself. TikTok is characterized in these sources as a, quote, powerful cultural influence by an opposing power.
And the algorithm is the worry.
It's the algorithm that really concerns experts. That ability to subtly influence public opinion, maybe censor certain information, and act as a vehicle for Chinese government propaganda and espionage.
Are there actual examples of this happening, or is it mostly theoretical risk?
No, we're not just talking hypotheticals here. The sources bring up specific historical examples of alleged manipulation.
Like what?
Former ByteDance employees have apparently alleged attempts by the company to censor stories that are, quote, unfavorable to the Chinese government. Things like blocking news about the genocide against the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, or the pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong, even the Tiananmen Square crackdown.
So if the CCP can control what millions of young Americans see, or maybe more importantly, don't see...
That's an immense tool for geopolitical influence. Huge.
Okay, but let me push back a bit here. If the goal is protecting free speech and the marketplace of ideas, How is forcing a huge company like ByteDance to sell off a, what, $50 billion asset not infringing on their economic rights? Doesn't the government risk looking like it's just picking winners and losers, demanding a sale, probably to an American buyer?
That's a really important point, and it gets to the heart of the legal strategy proponents are using.
How do they square that circle?
They stress that the legislation is not a blanket ban. That's key. It offers TikTok, quote, a clear path to continue operating if it completely cuts ties with its CCP-linked parent company. It's framed as a security mandate, not primarily an economic penalty.
And there's a clock ticking.
Yes, the timeline is finite. Senator Tom Cotton, for example, was quoted saying there's no legal basis for any kind of extension if ByteDance doesn't agree to a sale that satisfies the law, meaning truly cutting all links with Communist China.
So stay, but only if you're no longer under adversary control. That's the message.
That's the message.
That distinction does make sense from purely a national security perspective. I mean, if the government already banned TikTok on its own employee phones back in 2022 because of security risks,
which our sources confirm they did,
then the logical next question is, why should that same threat be allowed to, as one source put it, contaminate the phones of millions of American youth?
Exactly. And we really need to stress these security concerns go way beyond just apps. They're bleeding into the physical supply chain, too.
Okay, like what?
Hardware risks. DJI drones, for example, they come up a lot.
Yeah.
Widely cited as a serious security risk.
Yeah.
Allegations that the information they gather, images, location data, can be relayed back to the CCP.
That's not just drones.
No. Even modern Chinese-made vehicles are being flagged now as a, quote, massive national security issue.
Cars. Why are cars a national security issue? That seems like a stretch.
Well, the reasoning provided is stark. As one analyst put it, China is directly characterized by policymakers as an evil autocratic regime that detests Western ideals.
Okay, but the cars themselves.
Modern vehicles are basically rolling computers, right? They collect enormous amounts of data location, biometrics from sensors, operational data, how you drive, where you go.
Right.
So allowing a regime designated as an adversary to control the hardware that collects all that data, well, it's viewed as simply too great a risk. For military security, government security, even civilian security.
So this is how the new Cold War looks. Not just missiles and spies, but the cars we drive, the drones we fly.
That's the picture being painted, yeah.
Okay, that sets the stage perfectly for our next area. This aggressive repurposing of economic tools, specifically tariffs to serve these national security goals.
That's right.
And the sources draw this direct, really alarming line between trade policy and what they're calling the drug war, focused squarely on fentanyl.
Yeah, and the scale of the fentanyl crisis, it's hard to even process.
How bad is it?
Between 2021 and 2023 alone, the number of Americans who died from opioids, largely driven by fentanyl, surpassed the combined U.S. death tolls from World War I, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War.
That is staggering. That statistic alone.
It fundamentally transforms it, doesn't it? It moves it beyond just a health crisis into a genuine national emergency, a security crisis.
So where does China fit into this lethal picture?
Well, sources like the Heritage Foundation identify China as the, quote, primary force behind the crisis.
How so?
They explain that Chinese precursor chemicals, the basic ingredients, form the, quote, backbone of the supply chain for these synthetic opioids.
Okay.
These chemicals are then often shipped to Mexico, where the cartels manufacture the final fentanyl product and traffic it throughout the U.S. It's a critical vulnerability in that supply chain.
And China's role isn't just passive, like leaky chemical factories.
Apparently not, according to these sources. They argue China has actively leveraged this crisis. They've used fentanyl negotiations in the past to try and seek concessions from the U.S. on other issues.
So essentially weaponizing American deaths for geopolitical gain.
That's the accusation, yes. And sources also indicate China maintains an active presence in Mexico and the U.S., specifically through sophisticated money laundering networks that help finance these cartel operations.
Wow. Okay, so that leads us directly to the justification for these new tariffs being applied. Imports from Mexico, Canada, and China. And policymakers are being very direct, saying this is, quote, not a trade war, but a drug war. How is that mechanism supposed to work? Are the tariffs meant to generate revenue for border security, or is the threat of tariffs the main leverage in talks?
The sources suggest it's kind of both, actually.
Okay.
The tariffs are definitely framed as a tool to, quote, hold China, Mexico, and Canada accountable for their roles in the influx of drugs and also illegal immigration.
Which is also seen as a related crisis.
Right. For context, Customs and Border Patrol recorded over 10 million encounters with unauthorized immigrants just under the Biden administration. That's a huge strain on resources.
And the revenue side.
The economic benefit is presented as tangible, too. These tariffs could generate billions of dollars in revenue.
Billions. And the argument is that money is justified because,
according to proponents, it can help dampen the impacts of wildly irresponsible fiscal policy. Think the rising federal deficit. Essentially, using trade taxes to help fund national priorities like border security or drug interdiction.
So this whole interventionist stance, it reflects that broader pivot we mentioned earlier towards the America First grand strategy.
Exactly. Aims squarely at replacing what proponents call the outdated post-World War II globalist framework.
Let's unpack some of that jargon. Strategic decoupling. What does that mean in practice? How do tariffs and subsidies actually achieve that with China?
Right, so strategic decoupling basically means systematically reversing the deep economic integration between the U.S. and China that happened over the last few decades.
Why?
Because that integration is now seen as strategically dangerous, especially in critical sectors like technology, pharmaceuticals, essential minerals. The argument is simple. We can't rely on our primary adversary for things we absolutely need.
And tariffs are seen as the best tool for this decoupling. Why not other things, like subsidies for American companies?
Well, tariffs are championed by some as a more potent economic tool, precisely because they work at the market level. They make foreign goods more expensive across the board.
As opposed to?
As opposed to what's often called industrial policy solutions. That's where the government actively tries to pick winners and losers by directly subsidizing specific companies or giving out contracts.
Okay, so tariffs are seen as more market-based.
Proponents argue yes. Tariffs create a market-wide incentive for any domestic company to step up and compete, which they frame as a more free market approach to protecting American interests, even though it's still intervention.
The core belief driving all this economic nationalism seems to be about reciprocity, about fairness.
Yeah, that comes through strongly.
The sources argue again and again that the U.S. has to intervene because, quote, not a single country we trade with does not have their finger on the scale to some degree.
Meaning everyone else is already managing their trade for national benefit.
Right. So the idea is if other nations want to play in the huge U.S. economy, they have to play by U.S. rules, which now include these security and accountability factors.
That belief is definitely powerful. But, it leads directly to this really crucial tension point, especially within conservative circles.
Which is?
Balancing national security against free market principles. Some conservatives are strongly opposed to outright bans or heavy intervention, arguing it's government overreach that suffocates economic liberty.
And this brings us right back to that DJI drone issue we talked about.
Exactly.
The counter-argument we see in the sources is that maybe this intervention is just, well, a cynical response because the U.S. lacks a competitive domestic alternative.
Especially when the non-U.S. product, like DJI drones, is widely acknowledged to be superior or cheaper.
Right, and that's not just a hypothetical concern.
No, it's not just theory. One perspective highlighted in our sources actually suggests the entire DJI ban might have been heavily lobbied for by a competing U.S. company.
A competitor whose own product was reportedly inferior.
Inferior and priced, according to this claim, at a staggering 5,000% markup compared to the DJI equivalent.
Wow. Okay, so if the superior product is potentially being banned mainly because a domestic competitor is pushing for it, doesn't that just undermine the whole national security justification?
That's the core question, isn't it?
How do we know the government isn't just kicking that domestic company as a winner, using security as a convenient excuse?
That is the fundamental conflict listeners really have to wrestle with here. The proponents, of course, push back hard.
How?
They counter that when the adversary is the CCP, every economic decision effectively becomes a national security decision. The argument is that even if the domestic product is more expensive or less advanced initially, the inherent security risk of the foreign CCP-linked product outweighs all those economic considerations.
So economics takes a backseat to security, full stop.
In this view, yes.
Yeah.
It shows just how deeply intertwined economic nationalism and national security have become in this new strategic environment.
Okay. So if we try to pull all these different threads together,
Yeah, let's synthesize.
we see a pretty clear pattern emerging in U.S. policy based on these sources.
Definitely. Bans on technology, TikTok, DJI drones, potentially Chinese electric vehicles. They're all designed to tackle those perceived threats of data, espionage, propaganda, and foreign influence.
And then you have the aggressive use of tariffs.
Right. Aimed squarely at addressing economic imbalances, holding adversaries accountable, particularly on the fentanyl issue, and attacking that deadly supply chain directly.
And both sets of policies seem driven by this single overarching goal.
Containing the CCP, seen as the primary peer rival. That's the through line.
So we are definitely seeing the government becoming much more willing to intervene forcefully, whether it's non-negotiable divestiture demands for huge digital platforms,
Or massive tariffs on physical goods coming across the border.
the goal seems to be shielding Americans from foreign adversaries' influence, whether that's in the digital world, the physical supply chain, or even the information we consume.
Yeah.
Which leaves the big question for you, the listener.
Yeah.
In this new era of intense great power competition, does national security always automatically outweigh free market principles? And maybe more importantly, what's the true, perhaps hidden cost when we decide to secure our data and our borders, seemingly at any price?